Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the AOC PM&R podcast. I'm Megan Mardashti, one of the AOC PM&R Multimedia Committee co-chairs, and I'll be your host for today's episode. We have a special conversation lineup for you guys. We'll be speaking with Mr. Charlie Powell, who's a patient that I had the honor of meeting during my rotations and who has experienced a spinal cord injury. And through his story, we'll be able to learn a firsthand perspective on the challenges he's faced, his rehab journey, and the role that PM&R has played in helping him regain function and independence. For our listeners, I do want to highlight that this is a wonderful episode and an opportunity for us to go beyond the textbooks and our lectures, and we hope to be able to shed light on the real world application of PM&R and highlight the ways in which rehab specialists can really make a difference in the lives of individuals with spinal cord injuries. Alrighty, without further ado, let's dive in. Mr. Charlie Powell, we are super honored to have you here. Would you like to introduce yourself a bit and talk about your journey?
Sure. Yeah. As she said, my name is Charlie Powell. I'm retired now. I began my career, I worked 7.5 years as an orthopedic surgical technician and EMT. And then after that, I worked for 34 years in the Washington State University College of Veterinary Medicine as their public information officer. And I also taught in the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication at WSU, where I taught risk communication, crisis communication, and communicating science and technology. I lectured a lot in bioterrorism and agroterrorism, but as I said, I'm retired now. And this journey began for me. It'll be 4 years ago this month, actually January. And how it happened was at the time, my wife and I were living in Moscow, Idaho, and I had taken our dog out to do their business, and I walked around the side of our house, which was a slight slope, and I stepped on a piece of ice that was underneath some snow that I couldn't see. I slipped and I took a couple of big steps to catch myself, and I landed face first on our patio, our concrete patio, but I did not hit my face or head. I just hit my chest. But what happened is my head went forward and snapped my neck. I immediately felt an electrical impulse that went down both arms. And having the background that I did, I laid there for a moment and went, wow, I've really hurt myself this time. So I moved a little bit to make sure there was no broken bones and I didn't hear any crepitus. And I knew that my arms felt strange, so I didn't want to push up with them to get up. So I rolled over on my back and then sat up. This whole time, my dog's looking at me like, what the hell are you doing? Let's get out of the
Mhm.
snow. And so I went in the house. My wife is a registered nurse, and she's retired also now. And she had worked in every aspect of hospital nursing. And I told her, I said, I've really hurt myself this time. And we went to my doctor and they took x-rays and they said, well, we don't see anything on regular radiographs. Let's see how you do here for a couple of months with physical therapy. Physical therapy was ineffective for me, and they eventually referred me to a neurosurgeon in Spokane, but not before they did an MRI. And when they did the MRI, what they discovered was my neck was had a lot of stenosis and was very old and fragile, which I didn't realize that in 64-year-old men, that was pretty common at the time. I'm going on 69 now. And so in April of that year, so it would be 4 years this coming April, I had a fusion from C3 through C6. And that all worked out fine. I had great physical therapy. They did not need to send me to rehabilitation at that time. And I went on about my business. But beginning about, I would say honestly, about 18 months ago or a year ago, um, I just started having a lot of pain. And the pain was not in my neck. The pain was down my spine and in my limbs. and it would come and go. And you'll understand why I say that, because when I would go to bed at night, I would feel relief. I would get up in the morning and boom, things would really hit me and really be painful. So I suffered through that and just tried to deal with it with every way possible with my physician. And, I thought we were doing okay. But then beginning this last fall, about in August, I started to really deteriorate really fast. And what I mean by that is I could not hold myself up. I told my physician a number of times it felt as though my head was too heavy for my neck. And I said, I've got all these strange feelings that I'm feeling. I also had some aural hallucinations. So I would hear things like plastic crackling around my ears at night, and it would go away and then it would come back again, sort of like a tinnitus, but a different thing. And I had tinnitus as well. So I also had an extraordinary pain up the superior branch of the ophthalmic nerve that was so severe it felt like it was a hot wire underneath my skin burning. And I actually went to an anesthetist, and they did a block to try and break the pain cycle that was going on there. So these were all things that just led up to what I'm going to tell you actually happened to me in this. And eventually, it got to the point where my wife told our physician, which we both share the same physician, she said, I'm watching my husband become a quadriplegic. There's something very wrong here. And my physician said, okay, we got to get him to a neurosurgeon to have this evaluated. And it was 3 to 6 months to get into a neurosurgeon. So she said, I'm going to have to do the only way that I can get you in, and that is to send you to the ER. So I went to the ER on a Thursday night. They did an MRI of my entire spine and skull. They also did a CT of my neck. And it was apparent at that time that, in addition to all of the uh, infirmities of age I have in my spine, I have a lot of arthritis and stuff. I had a severe anterior subluxation of C2 over C3. Now, why that's serious is because you can sort of think about the cervical spine like a padlock laid on its side, and there are 7 of them stacked up. Actually, C1 doesn't look like that, but there are 6 of them stacked up. And through the hasp of all the locks is where the cord runs. Well, you can imagine when one slips on the other, it pulls that cord over the top of the one below it. And that's exactly what happened. My cord was dragged over the top of C3. I suffered a spinal cord injury and actually had a level of spinal cord death that has occurred in there. Um, and so I was taken to surgery on an emergency basis. Again, services were so limited that I spent the night in the emergency room, literally slept on a gurney. The neurosurgeon who reviewed my films on RoboDoc, she said, don't let that guy out of the emergency room. Whatever you do, stabilize that guy and get him to a neurosurgeon immediately. And so they were going to fly me from Pullman, Washington to Spokane, Washington. That's a distance of about 90 miles. And the night that they were going to fly me, there were no beds available at Sacred Heart Medical Center where they were going to do my surgery. So I actually waited in the Pullman hospital for 3 nights until they could get me out. And finally, they came in one evening right after dinner, and they said, okay, we're going to fly you. And they said, but we can't bring you in a helicopter because there's too much fog and it's freezing. And so all of our helicopters are down. We're going to have to take you up in a fixed wing aircraft. So they prepared me. And, when you prepare a patient for this, it's just literally like you roll them up in a big hot dog bun and you strap them down to the gurney. And then from there, it's an ambulance to the airfield. Then the plane is there. It's an air ambulance. So It takes your gurney right up into the aircraft, and it's all secure, and nobody has to do a bunch of heavy lifting. It's actually pretty easy, all things considered. And you get strapped in, and there I had four paramedics with me, a flight nurse, and then two pilots. So I felt very comfortable with that. It took 15 minutes to fly up to Phelps Field in Spokane, and then another 15 minutes by ground ambulance to get to Sacred Heart. When I got to Sacred Heart, they were certainly ready for me, but they said, we have been incredibly busy with neurosurgery cases, emergency neurosurgery cases like yours, and you're a low priority, so you're going to have to wait. So I actually waited 2 days before I could have my surgery. But the day before my surgery, the neurosurgeon came into my room about, oh, I would say 11 o'clock in the morning. And this is Dr. Carlson. And he said, and he and I hit it off really well from the beginning. He recognized that I knew what I was talking about. And he kept saying things like, you've got all the right answers. You know what you're talking about. And so he said, I'm going to do your surgery, but I'm not doing it today. He said, I've been up for 36 hours already. He said, this is a surgery that I need to take my time with and do properly. He said, I haven't done one in a while. He said, I specialize now in brain tumors, but I'm on call. He said, I have done more than 1,000 of these before, though. And so he said, I'm very confident in all this. And when he said, I'm too tired to do it today, I said, perfect answer. And so I said, go home, get some sleep, and we'll see about tomorrow. He said, yeah. He says, it depends on whether I get called out tonight or not. So he went home, he got some sleep. He came in the next morning early, and he said, we're going to do you today. It'll be about lunchtime. So they came and got me. They took me up to the surgery suite, and 3 hours later, I was back in recovery. And basically, what they did is they reduced the subluxation to get C2 back on top of C3. And then they had to fuse C2 to C3 in order to also get that to hold. And they had to put in additional hardware because we're fusing another level. So I'm now fused C2 through C6. And as far as the surgery goes, I'm not having any pain from that. I'm not having any residual from the surgery, but you certainly can have, and I think that's important for your students to know, because in order to do this, they turn you, of course, upside down on the table. They put two big broad straps on your shoulders, and they put two pins in the side of your head, and they have to ratchet you apart to get those vertebrae to spread so they can get in there to do the fusion. And so you have some incredible pain in your shoulders from where this happens. The big wide straps are. I still have skin lesions from where that occurred. They're not visible lesions, but interestingly, they feel just like a really bad sunburn. And there's really nothing that can be done about that. But I think, I refer to those things as necessary intraoperative injuries that a person can suffer. So anyway, the surgery went well. I recovered from it well. And the surgeon came in the next day and he says, well, things went perfect. He said, the greatest danger is the two screws that I put in your C2 vertebrae are in a position where directly behind them are your vertebral arteries. And if I hit one of those, you're an instant stroke patient. And so he said, but we don't hit those. So, and I didn't hit yours. So I said, yeah, I knew that was the case, because I was aware of the surgery. And he brought me some hardware that he took out of my neck, a couple of rods and four screws, just as I kind of collect that stuff and have a whole shelf of it here at home. So anyway, he said, that's when I first heard you're going to have to go to rehab. And I said, rehab? Why? I didn't have to go for my first fusion. What's that all about? He said, you're going to have to go to rehab. And he said, here's why. I still have complete anesthesia in fingers 1, 2, and 3 on my right hand. I'm right hand dominant as well. I have paresthesia in 4 and 5 on my right hand, and I have mild paresthesia on all 5 of my fingers in my left hand, primarily on the tips. And for any of the students that have ever suffered a mild frostbite, that's what it feels like to me. But truly, when I say anesthesia about these 3 fingers on the right, my index finger on my right hand is completely numb. I can't feel a thing. I've told the doctors I could bite this finger off and I wouldn't know it, you know. It's that, but I have full motor function. So that's an interesting aspect of this. And so we're trying to regain the sensory function on my fingers, but it could take up to a year or 2 for that to happen because we're dealing with quite a distance there. So after being in Sacred Heart for 3 days, they decided, okay, it's time to ship you to rehab. And so they just drove me a few blocks away to St. Luke's Medical Rehab Center there. And that's where I met an incredible coordinated team of people. I cannot praise them highly enough. The minute you get there, there's a case coordinator at your gurney side while you're being wheeled into your room that is already making arrangements for your discharge and all of the people that you will see and when you'll see them and how you'll see them. They make all of the post rehab appointments for you ahead of time. Soon after that, you're met by the dietitian, and she came in, and I happen to be a type 2 diabetic. So they decided they would do carbohydrate counting for me and then adjust my insulin accordingly, and they did. I had a visit that same day by a person who is a diabetes specialist, and he came in and he said, "Why am I seeing you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, your A1Cs are 6s all the way across the board every time you've had one." He said, "You're obviously in great control, so I just don't know why I'm here." So he signed off on me. They sent in a speech pathologist to assess whether or not I had had any speech difficulties. And the way that they did that is we had a conversation, of course, but then they made me have a conversation as at the same time that I was eating crackers and at the same time that I was drinking something to see if I was having any choking or anything. And they, of course, asked me about that ahead of time. They weren't just risking it, as it was.
Right.
Uh, so that just gives you an idea of how extensive this was. Besides physical therapists, plural, and occupational therapists, plural, coming in. They tell you when you enter St. Luke's rehab, you should expect to work a minimum of 3 hours a day clinically on why you're there. And so they prepare you accordingly. They start a 3-ring binder for you that has every one of your records in it. It has all of your future appointments on it. Everything is changed every day. You get a schedule every day of all of the activities that you're going to be doing. It is so professional. I am just truly amazed at how professional and coordinated it was. So St. Luke's Rehab in Spokane, Washington is operated on 3 floors of a building there. They have 3 different gyms. They have a complete mock setup of a community. So when you walk in the door, what you see in front of you is a pickup truck body, you see a small car body, you see a public bus body, and you see a Southwest Airlines body in the back. And these are all to help you learn how to enter and exit those as you progress through your rehabilitation. And I've got to tell you, it was amazing because those are all donated by the companies that produce them. There is a mock restaurant so they can assess how you use silverware, whether or not you can, what adaptive types of things may be necessary. There is a mock grocery store to see what you can pick up and hold. And those types of things. Can you reach in your pocket and get change if you're a man? You know, it's an interesting thing because I had a little bit of background in this from my work at Washington State University's Veterinary College. We developed a alternative surgery track where live animals are not used. And one of the things that we learned very early on, this was 25 years ago, is that if you have a velvet bag with an assortment of coins in it, a man can reach in and pull out quarters and dimes much easier than a woman can. But it has nothing to do with gender. It has to do with men are always used to reaching into a pocket to get change. Women are always used to opening a purse and visually identifying it first. So when you train women with the velvet bag, in about an hour, they're up to the same competency as the men. So that's just one example of the types of things. So I was aware of that. And they had a number of those things there that were just astounding. One morning they came in before breakfast and at 7 a.m. and they handed me this sheet of paper and it had 8 things listed on it. And I was like, I'm sorry, what is this? I don't see this on the schedule or anything else. They say, no, it's not on the schedule. This is an additional exercise we're going to have you do. You need to walk around this facility and find those 8 things. And so
Oh,
you
wow.
take off and you start wandering the halls looking for an exit that goes to the outside on the north, or you have to find the bus, or you have to find, something in the gym or a ball or things like that. And it takes you a while to walk around and find those things. It's actually quite extensive, and they were there with you, behind you, to make sure it was safe, but they were not going to help you. They were going to make sure that you had to struggle a bit to do that. In the actual physical therapy and occupational therapy, that involved a wide array of exercises that they would do that were all quite effective. And I'm happy to talk about those if you'd like. But that kind of gets you guys to where I got and why I was there. I'm sorry it sounds a little long-winded, but Megan, ask any questions you'd like to ask of me, and we'll continue.
Wonderful. I am truly speechless. I really, really appreciate all the details that you shared. That's quite a bumpy journey that you went through, and I think you wonderfully highlighted how especially PM&R is a very multidisciplinary and collaborative approach to
Yes,
care. You talked about the PTs, OTs, and speech therapy, and how everyone is involved. And what you shared about the 3 hours, that's actually a requirement of
right,
inpatient rehabilitation, that patients do need to participate pretty much like 3 hours per day
right.
once you're in rehab. And another thing you talked about is like the access to care that I wanted to highlight about. For instance, the neurosurgery
Hmm.
that you were advised to, hey, you might be able to get faster care if you go to the emergency room. And that is
Right.
the unfortunate side of our healthcare that a lot of patients are faced with. And not everyone might have the health literacy or understanding of how sometimes those little pieces in the system work.
Yep.
Um,
And that's really an important point there, Megan. And it's important that you recognize that. Um, I've always told patients, you need to be your own best advocate because nobody else is going to be able to do it for you. But the problem is, you've got people who, in our society have never taken even a biology class, much less anything more. They don't know how to navigate this. And I ran into patients myself in orthopedics that would say things like, when you're trying to get the surgical consent form signed, they would say, oh, I don't want to know anything about that. Just show me where to sign. I don't want to, those details will bother me too much. So you've got some people with a psychological barrier to those things. And unfortunately, right now, post COVID, the demand for the specialties and the subspecialties is so great that access is truly limited. It's limited by the physical nature. There's not enough people doing it.
right, right. And I hope that what you shared also reaches hopefully some patients, in the future that do take that extra time to look at those fine lines. Do, like you said, be an advocate of your own health, because no one wants the best for you like the way you'd want for yourself. So it's
Right.
important to be able to also take that time. Um, so like I said, it's wonderful to hear the inpatient side of things. So
Hmm.
now that you've been discharged from
Hmm.
inpatient rehab, how has your recovery planning been looking like? Is PM&R still a specialty that you follow up with? Are you
Yeah.
continuing any therapies? If you can,
I would
uh,
say that things to me appear seamless. And when I say that, I tip my hat to the case coordinator up in Spokane who set everything up. So I see a physical therapist twice a week. I see an occupational therapist twice a week. With the occupational therapist, we're doing hand exercises, we're doing electrical muscle stimulation, and TENS stimulation. We're doing a number of other things that where we're trying to um, build proprioception and some form of haptic feedback. Because when you have numb fingers, you can't tell if you've picked something up or not. You can't tell how hard you're holding on to something, like to tear open a bag of peanuts or something. It's very difficult to do. And so you have to, in some way, develop a coping mechanism for that. And there are tools that help too. I mean, I have a large diameter pen that I can write with. Otherwise, my handwriting it would be almost illegible. And I know that's a joke in medicine that everybody's handwriting looks like VTAC, but uh, uh, it is just one of those things where, you have to think forward, and that's what an occupational therapist really does, is get you thinking forward. So again, thanks to St. Luke's Rehabilitation Medicine for setting everything up and working with us accordingly. And these are all local OTs and PTs that I'm seeing. So I don't have to go very far, just a couple of miles across town here. I'm very fortunate for that. My normal primary care provider is an internal medicine specialist, and she's also a hospitalist at the hospital in Pullman, Washington, where I was. I know her and trust her and have been with her for a number of years. She's a bit anti-surgery, which I would say kind of slowed this whole process down. But I think when my wife kind of put her on the spot about me potentially becoming what we now refer to as a tetraplegic, I think kind of the alarm bells all went off, and for all the right reasons. I think if you look up subluxations of C2 on C3, it's pretty rare. I mean, this is a rare injury, and it's also a rare injury to come out as well as I have. I mean, I've regained my balance, I've been able to regain my proprioception. I've been able to regain my ability to walk upright, but with the walker. I'm hoping that within a couple of weeks, I will graduate to independent walking, maybe with my trekking poles, but eventually be able to walk myself. That was another thing that happened at St. Luke's, is they asked me what were my goals. And I said, the primary goal I have is I would like to be able to walk a mile on uneven ground independently. And they said, well, that's a good modest goal and everything else. And then they send a recreational specialist in to talk to you. What do you like to do? What are you missing right now? And I particularly like to fly fish. I actually taught that in the PE department too at WSU for 12 years. My hobby was building wooden boats before all this happened. I would love to be able to do that again, but I don't know whether that will happen or not. And walking in streams or rivers, the rocks are very slippery. I may not be able to do that. And they were very cautious at what they would tell me. I told them one of the primary things that I missed with all of this, and this was due to this incredible pain, is I couldn't even focus to read. And I am a voracious reader, as you can see.
Mhm.
And I just didn't realize how much I was missing that. And now I'm just reading all the time now that I feel as good as I do. And I'm so grateful that that all came back. And I'm so grateful for rehabilitation medicine as I experienced it.
Right. I'm for those who are not watching this on YouTube, I am smiling ear to ear. It's truly heartwarming to hear the functional gains that you have been able to
Mhm.
make throughout this whole journey. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about PM&R is that we do focus on functionality, but even a step further, like you said, the patient's individual goals, and that can look very different for everyone. So I'm really glad to hear that that was something that was part of your care journey, and truly do want to also give a big shout out to care coordinators and social workers because they are the
Yeah,
angels of rehab medicine.
absolutely.
And at times just seeing how they coordinate all these
Mhm.
different moving parts, I'm at pure awe how they can do
Right.
all
I
of
mean,
it
they
so
ask you
quick.
everything, Megan. They ask you,
Mhm.
how are your meals prepared at home? Do you prepare them? Does your wife prepare them? Do you order them in? What is it? I mean, they go through every aspect of your life. The occupational therapist here locally, the first time I met with her, she came to my house. She starts
Wow.
rearranging furniture and stuff. So I am at much safer than I was before the surgery. Before the surgery, I had 9 falls in 8 days before the surgery. And the fact that I didn't end up a tetraplegic is truly just a miracle. But ever since I got home, I've not had any falls. I can lie down on the floor and get up on my own. But I wasn't able to do that before. I mean, truly, these people are angels on earth, and I really, really appreciate that. I had 3 different physicians come in and talk to me in the rehab center, and they were all outstanding. That's where I met you, of course. You were trailing one of them. I thought all of them were just very good people, but overall, the number one trait that I would say set everyone apart was they were willing to listen as much as anything else. They were so incredibly good at listening. And that's something as somebody who was an adjunct professor of communication, you try and stress that on people, but they don't quite get it sometimes, but they would listen to everything I said. Sometimes I didn't even know that I said something that they questioned, and then I had to correct it. I mean, that's how good of listeners they were. And I was very impressed with that.
That's awesome to hear. You actually, I think, answered one of my questions, and that was about how, healthcare professionals and future physicians in PM&R can best advocate for their patients. And patient advocacy can look very different. But I think
Mhm.
on, as easy on a scale that what you mentioned there is listening. And what I like to actually call it is therapeutic listening, because
Mhm.
a lot of times medicine has such a fast-paced environment, and it's just next patient, next thing, go go go, we don't have time, and it's so easy to not provide that space for the patients to be heard. But that's really wonderful to hear that space was given to you, and I'm sure that definitely helped in your recovery journey as
Right,
well.
right. It's very interesting because I don't know if you're familiar with the Calgary Cambridge model of clinical communication, but some of the primary research that they did to develop this is they looked at how long is it before when the physician enters the room to see you, how long is it before they start talking? And typically that was about 17 seconds.
Mhm.
Regardless of what you said, they would start talking over you very shortly because they're in a hurry,
Mhm.
and I'm not faulting so much physicians for doing that. I'm just saying it's a fact. And it's something that you would be better off scheduling better time and doing that. And I think you can actually make time for yourself if you're a professional. This is one hint I would really give young physicians that are coming through is use your paraprofessional staff. They're the people that create time for you. Okay. When I worked in orthopedics, my surgeon never put on a cast. I put on all the casts. My surgeon never closed a wound. I closed all the wounds. My surgeon never took out stitches. I took out stitches. And if you set yourself up with good nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, or those types of specialists or special paraprofessional people, you will be rewarded with the gift of time more than anything else.
Absolutely. Outsourcing is what I hear. And definitely the more you do that, the more you're able to just be present with the patients
Sure.
and be truly be able to allocate that time that you're interviewing your patients or whether
Mhm.
that's talking. And that's definitely something that we should all be doing. So thank you
Right.
for
I
that
mean,
reminder.
think, for example, I, obviously am a bit of an open book with all
Mhm.
this, and I have a background that allows me to communicate in the same language. But
Right.
there's a lot of people who don't, and they
Mhm.
don't want to be able to walk a mile. They think of walking a mile as torture. They want to be able to play with grandkids, go to the market and get their food, and that's about it, or maybe mow the lawn. Everybody's needs are different. And if you don't listen, you won't be able to assess those needs and therefore will not be able to build a competent care plan, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And that's what we're about in the world of PM&R. It's that individualized care and wanting to work with patients. And that's, part of the patient empowerment is to be
Mhm.
able to create that form of model of, I guess, care that is
Mhm.
truly individualized to the patient. So
Mhm.
thanks for sharing that. So a lot of our listeners are medical students, but also PM&R residents. And I would love to hear what you think is one of the more important things to understand about the long-term journey of a patient who has experienced a spinal cord injury.
Yeah, the more that I have read about it, because I've researched my injury now and I've researched things as obtuse as how do you return sensation to digits that are affected by an injury at this level. I think being able to work with people as their needs change when they get home. When the person gets home, if, God forbid, they're a tetraplegic and they're in a chair and they've got competent help coming in on 8-hour schedules or 6-hour schedules, that's very different than what I'm experiencing. I'm a lucky person. I'm a really lucky person. And I'm very grateful for having no more loss than I have suffered. At the same time, when you're on a spinal cord injury floor like I was in rehab, you do see some people that have had it much worse than you do. And then, of course, there's the stroke floor above, and then there's the brain tumors below, and that sort of thing. And it's unfortunate that you see that. So be prepared for the wide range of what you're going to run into, and be prepared that people's needs are going to be changing as they change and they live life. I am aware of some famous people that have ALS, and as that horrible disease progresses, obviously their needs change dramatically. Even the ability to communicate changes dramatically with them. My wife has Parkinson's disease, and she's relatively newly diagnosed. She has some mild tremors now, and that's about the effect of it, but it's going to get worse, and our needs will change. Fortunately, her being a nurse, we bought a new house over here in Pullman for us, and there are no stairs in it. It's got grab bars everywhere. This was already in the house. The occupational therapist who came and reviewed our home, she was just stunned that we had all this. And I said, well, thank my wife, because she's a nurse, and she says when people get 60, you got to get away from stairs and you got to get grab bars and et cetera, et cetera. And she's kind of a little bit of a Nazi about it, uh, but that's okay. And because I didn't want to be hurt, and I'm really glad we have the things that we have right now. The other thing I would say is resources. People may not have the money to make changes at their home. They may not have the ability to or know who to contact or how to contact. And I think if you entrench yourself in your community so that you know what the resources are that potentially are there to help people, you'll be better served at serving your patients, you know.
Absolutely. Um, so I dabble in meditation here and there, and I
Oh,
think
good.
yes.
So do I.
And oh, wonderful.
Mhm.
Because I think, part of being in medicine, we gotta really look after ourselves and or to provide good care, because one of
Right.
my favorite saying is that you can't pour from an empty cup. And,
Great.
along the lines of making sure that you understand that you're curating your care to the patient's
Mhm.
changed needs. It's that almost that impermanence of
Mhm.
life, and just that's how life is. We're not ever constant beings. Is whether you
Right.
have a disability or not, you will change, right? So I think having that mindset when you're um approaching your patient care,
Mhm.
that can take you by a lot far, and making sure that you're also meeting your patients where they're at. Like you said, not everyone will have resources, and um, the type of care that you might need to provide for one
Mhm.
patient could look very different for someone else. You might need
Right.
to, connect them with the right resources with the community, and then someone else,
Sure.
they might have better access or understanding of those things, and you don't need to necessarily do that.
Mhm.
So definitely those are important reminders
Yeah,
for
I
us.
can give you kind of an experience about that too. When I first entered medicine as a paraprofessional, I ended up working private duty my whole time. Um,
Mhm.
and it was with one surgeon in the beginning. He was directly out of his residency at Worcester in Boston. And he, was extremely good as a surgeon. He was very good to work for and very generous to me. But he and I took call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2.5 years at three hospitals simultaneously that were separated by 17 miles for 2.5 years before we hired our first associate. I don't wear that as a badge of honor. I wear that as a badge of stupidity. Don't do that. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to get sued. Knock on wood, we didn't ever get sued. Um, but nowadays you can't really do that. And I wouldn't I wouldn't suggest anybody do that. Hire the people that you need to be around you. And a lot of people your age, Megan, don't want to actually run a business of being a physician. They just want to be a physician. A lot of the internal medicine people now all want to be hospitalists. And that's fine. They don't have to run a business. They just get a paycheck like anybody else, and all of those worries are off their back. That's fine. If that's what you want to do, then do that. But to jump into this world as a go, 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 go surgeon that just wants to do as many cases as possible, and I'm just picking on one subspecialty there, that's not going to serve you well for the long term. You really need to, as you say, not try and pour from an empty cup, because there were times where, even though we were local, I was just napping in the doctor's lounge in between surgeries for 2 or 3 days at a time, before I could get home.
Mhm.
And that was nuts. It was horrible to be that fatigued and to still have to maintain that clinical focus that you have to maintain. Yeah.
Mhm. That's a important life lesson for us to definitely to remember. And I do think that that culture of medicine is shifting with our generation, that people are caring more about mental health. People
Hmm.
are caring more about like their own physical health. Because I think one of the typical stereotypes about physicians is that, oh, how are you giving health advice when your own health isn't as
Correct.
well, right? Or as well
Right.
maintained. And I think that's something that it's a good shift. It's a positive shift. And it's definitely been, long due for this type of mindset
I
to
I
happen.
couldn't agree more. I mean, you guys are more in tune with your physical health, getting to the gym, whenever you can, or doing something outdoors whenever you can, is so vital. And you guys are just proving it day after day after day.
Right. Well, Charlie, I think this was pretty much all my questions that I had.
Okay,
This by far, I would say, has been one of the most comprehensive podcast episodes that we've had. You did an
sure.
amazing job of, really touching on all the different aspects of what PM&R entails and
Mhm.
how, like, one of the strength of our field is that it is truly collaborative, and it's been wonderful to hear that from your perspective and how that's helped you in your recovery journey.
Mhm.
And last but not least, truly grateful for your willingness to be open and
Oh, sure.
vulnerable. Because that's, in my opinion, that's how we can best learn. And there's the lectures and textbooks, one side of it, but I think our patients are our best teachers. So I do
Right.
want to extend that appreciation.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It was my honor to be here. And if I can ever come back at another time and do something else for you, I'm happy to do it. I think this is so vital, and I love educating young people. As I always said when I was still working, I said, universities are truly the fountain of youth. Most people don't know it, but every year you get renewed by another bunch of fresh faces like yours.
Appreciated. And thank you so much to all of our listeners for taking the time and listening to today's episode. If you have a few seconds, please leave a review on our Spotify or Apple Podcast page and let us know what you'd like to hear in the future. Until next time.